Hey folks, it's been a while, I guess, since I've gone over my car to any extent, and so I wanted to do, I don't know, like a 5 minute or so video on the car and kind of what's up with it. So this is my drift car here. This is a spare chassis that I have. I actually want to build a drag car out of this one. The hood and this bit of a fender up here were on this car, and the parts that are on the front of this car came from that one. But what I have here is a Saab 2.3 liter engine. It has forged pistons and it has connecting rods from an earlier 2 liter engine. These are VAG short coils, like Volkswagen Audi Group short coils. They are a smart coil, and they have pretty good energy. I don't know exactly what those numbers are, but they're quite good. This intake manifold was a drive-by-wire intake when it was used by Saab. And so I bought this throttle plate. It's just like a cheap eBay throttle plate. And I adapted the mounting plate here and bolted it down to the intake. Initially, I had welded it on the inboard side and then bored through it with my milling machine, and that ended up being very thin and it cracked, and I had a boost leak later, but I took care of that. I have a oil pressure sensor that goes to my ECU, and then just a light to the dashboard. I don't have like an oil pressure gauge in the car. I also don't have a boost gauge in the car. I'm not a big fan of gauges. This is a Speedway Motors Chevy dual pass radiator. I can't remember the exact dimensions of it. I think it's 26 wide by 19 tall by about 2.25 or 2.5 thick. And it's a pretty big radiator. It does a good job. I'm using a belt-driven water pump. This is a Pulsar Turbo. It's a 3576 with a .82 AR turbine housing. I built the header here. Some of the welding looks really good, and some of it not so much. I was having some trouble with argon leaking from the whip while I was doing some of this work. I'm actually not very good at welding thin wall stainless, like TIG welding it. I used to build a lot of downpipes back in the day, and I MIG welded a lot of that stuff. I'm okay with aluminum, but not that good with stainless. I built this strut bar here some time ago. I drew up these plates and bent them a little bit and bent the tubing and got all that in there, and it works pretty well. Definitely noticed increase in feeling in the front end when I put it on right away. It felt like the left wheel was more connected to the right wheel. I actually think that the frame rails, so to speak, in this chassis were moving more independently of one another before I put that strut bar on. I did all the wiring on this car, at least for the engine. I mean, it still has stock lighting, wiring, and stuff like that. But I use a lot of these DT connectors, so the injector harness, the coil harness, the wires running to like the crankshaft position sensor, which is like this plug over here. This cam sensor is actually an N52 camshaft position sensor, like a BMW one, and I'm reading directly off of a lobe, and then I'm running shielded wire back to the ECU for the cam trigger. I run the engine fully sequentially. I have two main relays. One of them runs the noisy stuff like the coils and the injectors, and the other one's like a quiet 12-volt source. This is my fan relay here, and I have like a pretty good sized Spall fan on the radiator, and it works pretty well. I used the slim fans for some time, but they're kind of pathetic, honestly, for drifting. But, you know, I don't really have many electrical problems. Um, I built this oil pan. There's a big kind of mess under the car here. But I built this oil pan when I put this stuff together, or modified, you know, a Dorman oil pan when I put this car together. And I'm pretty happy with it. It's done okay. It doesn't like have oil starvation issues or other problems like that. How the engine's in here is with a PMC Motorsport adapter that bolts this, basically a B235 Saab engine, like a heavily modified B235, to my ZF 320 or 310, whatever. It's a ZF 5-speed transmission. And then the PMC Motorsport flywheel with an automatic transmission flex plate that's like sandwiched in between the crank and that flywheel. And that's what the starter turns, is an automatic transmission flex plate. I have a very old SLR kit on here that I have daily driven and drifted for like 6 years. And there's no play in any of this stuff up here. I haven't changed any of these Heims or anything. I have BC coilovers. The upper hat is a spherical ball. This back here is fairly rigid. It's not actually a spherical ball. It's like a Delrin bushing in an eye bolt, so to speak. But it's pretty rigid. And then this is a ball joint here. So in the whole front end, there's not really like any rubber. So it's like a big go-kart, you know, pretty much. The engine also, I made these Delrin blocks that the engine is bolted down with. I made these mount arms here. This is one of the mount arms that I made that bolts to the engine and bolts down to the block. Pretty happy with that. There's some of my crappy wire feed welding on the downpipe. But I am running 3.5 inch tubing from the turbo all the way to the back of the car. And it works well. I'm not having any trouble with that. But you can see when the material's thicker, I actually TIG weld okay. You know, it's like reasonable. But on really thin wall stuff, I suck. I definitely need to work on that some. I have a stainless braided clutch hydraulic line. I just finished like upgrading the brake system on this car. So these are 316 millimeter mini rotors. They are 4x100 stock, but the hub center is a little small and had to be machined out. And then these are like Acura TL Brembo brakes. They're actually knockoff calipers, but they're, you know, clone of a Brembo Acura caliper. I've used these before and they're actually quite good. They're nicely machined and I haven't had any failures with them. So the inboard flange on the caliper lines up, is in the same plane with the flange on the knuckle, so a flat bracket. You know, I just designed and implemented a flat bracket to bolt the caliper on here. I've had some stainless line. Actually, this is for a different application. I think this is for a Saab or something. And used a banjo bolt, and it's plenty long. It's not being tugged on or anything like that. And that all worked out pretty well. I was running E46 front brake hoses on this thing for a long time because they're longer, and I needed longer lines because of the angle kit. These lower control arms are actually extended E36 arms with spherical balls on the outside that I bought from SLR, and they've been great. I've not had any trouble with them. The clutch that's in here is PMC Motorsport 5-puck solid disc with the Sachs heavy duty pressure plate, and I'm pretty happy with that. So I think that's, well, I got actually a couple other things up in the front here we could talk about. I know my video is not very fancy. I'll get this bumper cover off of here. So the oil system. So down in there, it's kind of hard to see. Let's see, maybe from the bottom. See, I do have some oil dripping from these cheap fittings here. But so I cut up and modified the stock oil filter stand, and I welded -10 fittings onto that. And, you know, out of that, you know, they had this banjo fitting here. So this is my turbo oil feed line. That's my oil return line from the turbo there. And this is my wastegate tube. And so these two bigger hoses go up to the oil filter first, and then to the oil cooler, which is actually a stock E30 oil cooler. But I modified it and moved it up here so it was kind of out of harm's way, and it's like directly behind the grill, so it gets a fair amount of air. Keeps things cooler. When I got this car, it didn't have an oil cooler on it, and I drifted it for years without an oil cooler and didn't really have any problems, you know. But I just felt like it was better to have an oil cooler on the engine. I mean, I hot lapped and beat the piss out of it, and I had that engine apart multiple times for different reasons and never had any bearing issues. And that was even with really bad pan design and low oil capacity, you know. So I knew it was starving for oil, drifting from time to time, even running, you know, a quart over. The oil capacity of this oil system is 10 quarts, you know. So it's like half a 5-gallon bucket is oil change on this thing. These are actually Jeep grills that are on the hood that I put on there to vent air, you know, hot air out of the top. That's why that hood has all those holes drilled in it. I think I cut these out to try and, yeah, see, I cut this stuff out a bit more on this hood. So yeah, the front is the mini rotors with the Acura TL brake calipers. In the back, I have E46 325 brake rotors. I think they're about 11.5 inches in diameter, like 390 millimeters. And then I used E90 rear brake calipers, and I have a pair of like Brembo knockoff calipers like those that would fit behind these 17-inch wheels no problem. But the 15-inch wheels that I use for drag racing, it has more of a deep dish, so the spokes are moved way in, and they were hitting those calipers. So these ones are really heavy, and I was trying to reduce unsprung weight, and that's why, you know, I wanted to use these big aluminum calipers instead of just going with something that came from a BMW or whatever, because most of them are just like big chunky cast steel pieces. But I'm pretty happy with it nonetheless. I screwed around and bought a bunch of these cheap calipers and found the one that fit the best. And like I said in a previous video, there are pads available for like an E46 330 that are taller this way. They're the same length and fit into the holders this way, but actually will engage more of the friction surface on the rotor. So if I feel like I have too much front brake bias, it's a step that I can take to add rear brake to the car. The primary reason for going up in brake rotor diameter was to get my handbrake to work better. It's a pass-through hydro, which would be something to talk about. So I built this stand back here, and then put a Willwood brake master in here, and then from the back of the car, where there's a T, where the brake line going to the rear of the car, I just kind of broke into that T and brought a line up here that feeds the master, and then the other one that goes back, you know, and applies the brakes when I pull up on the handle. I'm quite happy with this handle position, actually. I like a pull up handbrake, and it's, you know, pretty nice, like right between my shifter and my steering wheel. I made these things a while ago, these steering wheel plates. I'm pretty happy with those. So on this one, I cut this and painted it black, and then I cut a flat piece that bolts on underneath it and just clear coated it so it wouldn't rust. I have a simple, like an NHRA style 6-point cage with like a 4-point roll bar. This was before I had any of my equipment stuff that I have now. And this is actually a Fox body cage that I fit in here. And my welder was in really rough shape, like literally hadn't been fired up in 10 years. And the whip, or the, what is it called? The part inside the whip, you know, that the wire travels through, was all rusted, and I was having really bad wire feed problems, like wire speed consistency. And I've had that actually off and on with that welder for some time. I need some new welding equipment. But I feel pretty safe in here. You know, it's in there good. Like everything's anchored well. I have these plates down here. I could probably close off that little area there. Actually do these very differently now. Instead of these, a plate like this, like I would form the plate and have it weld to the side here, and then come down and then out on the floor, and then down again if need be, you know, in this area. But have it kind of engage more of the chassis, you know. A cage adds rigidity and, you know, personal protection or whatever, adds, you know, chassis rigidity. I definitely noticed when I put the door bars in this thing that the car got stiffer, you know. But yeah, this is a Jegs Fox body cage that I bought many years ago, and then just kind of made it fit. The hoop actually, the main hoop actually fits pretty well. There's all this sunlight coming in. Some shitty looking welding there. But yep, it fits pretty good. So in the back of the car, I have a surge tank with my fuel filter. I have a Marlboro 450 pump in the tank that lifts to this one, and then this is a 485 pump. I had a 525 in here, but the fuel got hotter in the tank, and I don't need that much pump. This car makes like 500 wheel at 30 psi, which is like my soft tune, and I've had it up to like 42 psi or something like that. It did a 10.5 in the quarter mile at, I think it was about 36 psi actually. So this is the rear suspension on the car. So the axles are part like drive shaft shop parts, like the differential output flanges are drive shaft shop. These are male MEYLE CV joints for a Porsche 930 CV. I mean, a Porsche 930 turbo, I guess. And these are 28 spline chromoly axle bars that I got from Apple Tree, and the boot kits and all that stuff. And then the shell on the outside is also a drive shaft shop shell. So I bought a pair of these drive shaft shop axles from an old friend of mine, relatively cheap, and they didn't fit right. They were too long. So I adapted them because the architecture is very similar to 930 stuff, just the spline count's different on the bars. So this is like a male 930 internals in the drive shaft shop shell, you know. These are my homemade tubular trailing arms that are on here. I use 3/4 inch Heim joints to connect them to the subframe, and I drew up these misalignment spacers in CAD and had a friend turn them off on his lathe. And then I use a double adjuster, like a telescoping adjuster on the outside to adjust toe. And this drive shaft is like a Corey Ellis drive shaft with 1310 U joints, and it's serviceable. So you can see one of the clips there. So you can replace the U joints when they fail. The weak thing on these drive shafts is the splines here. So they are twisting a little bit. Like I just had the transmission out of here not long ago. And when I push it back, you know, it gets stiff when I slide it back, so it doesn't move super easily anymore. And then I have the big Gibo on here, like an E36 Gibo, because it's a, you know, ZF 5-speed from an E36. And use this big muffler back here. It was really loud with the 3.5-inch exhaust on the 4-cylinder. Like when I would drive through downtown Lexington, it would echo off the buildings really bad. I was bending the floor down really bad in here, and so I had to bend the floor back up like 1.5 inches or so and cut the ears off. I kept the structure intact of the floor and kind of bent it back, and then I capped it with a piece of square tubing that I cut open, and it fit on there quite nicely. I think it was like 1.5 inch square tubing. And then I CAD this plate that is welded underneath that and acts as a spine to support the floor and pull down, you know, on a wider area of the floor. And you know, I use this E36 diff cover. These Dorman ones are considerably stronger than the stock ones. And so yeah, I guess that's about it for the back of the car. I am now on Max, M-A-X-X ECU, which I'm extremely happy with. I think this car at first was on Mega Squirt, like a kit version that I built. And then I had it on ECU Master EMU Classic, which I bought really cheap on eBay or something like that. And then recently bought this Max ECU on the recommendation of several people. It's a Swedish product, and I have a Swedish engine in the car. That's sort of part of it. But it's also just known globally as like a really good product. I don't know how much it's used here in the United States, but it has a lot of really good features for drag racing and stuff. And I'm actually going to be building a drag car pretty soon, and I'm going to use the same Max ECU race, but with a Chevy 5.3 that'll be turbocharged in this car actually. So I'm going to have two almost identical E30s, like gold E30s. And that one will be a drag car. I'm hoping to fit 2810s under the back of it, and set it low, so it'll probably be like tubbed and 4-linked and all that stuff on a 8.8. But that's another video sometime in the future. I think that's about it. I think I've gone over the car pretty thoroughly. I wish everybody the best. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I hope 2025 is good to you. Take it easy.